I asked my neighbor to keep an eye on my house while I was visiting my sister in Phoenix. 3 days into my trip, she called me. I could barely hear her at first. Her voice was so low it was almost a whisper. "Walter," she said, "I think there's someone locked in your son's basement." My heart stopped. Let me back up because none of this makes sense without the full picture. My name is Walter Haynes. I'm 63 years old, retired after 31 years as a licensed social worker for the state of Ohio. I've seen things in that job that most people never see. Children living in conditions that would make your stomach turn. Families that looked perfect from the outside and were rotting from the inside. I thought retiring meant leaving all of that behind. I thought the hardest part of my life was over. I was wrong. My son Marcus is 34. He was a good kid. Quiet, serious. The kind of boy who read books for fun and helped his mother with groceries without being asked. His mother, my wife Linda, passed away from a stroke 8 years ago. It hit Marcus hard. It hit us both hard. But I watched him pull himself together, finish his master's degree, land a decent job as a project manager at a logistics company here in Columbus. I was proud of him. I genuinely was. He met Diane 3 years ago. She worked in his office. She was polished, well-dressed, always smiling when she came around me. The first time Marcus brought her to Sunday dinner, she complimented my cooking twice and helped clear the table without being asked. I remember thinking, this one's good for him. Marcus had a daughter from a previous relationship. Her name is Lily. She was 4 when Marcus and Diane got together. Lily's mother, a young woman named Cassandra, had died in a car accident when Lily was just 18 months old. Marcus had been raising her alone since then, and he was doing a decent job. Not perfect, but he loved that little girl fiercely. She had his same serious eyes and her mother's curly hair, and she called me Grandpa Walt and climbed into my lap every single Sunday without fail. After Lily's mother passed, Marcus had applied for and received Social Security survivor benefits on Lily's behalf, about $980 a month, deposited into a dedicated account he'd set up for her future. He told me about it plainly, matter-of-factly, the way Marcus talked about most things. It's her money, Dad, college or whatever she needs. I thought that was responsible of him. I thought that showed good character. When he married Diane, I hoped she'd take to Lily the way a stepmother should. The early signs seemed fine. They went to the zoo together. Diane posted pictures. Everything looked warm and normal on the surface. But I started noticing things. Small things at first. Lily stopped talking as much when Diane was in the room. That serious little face of hers got more serious, more careful. She'd watch Diane the way a dog watches a stranger. Not aggressive, just wary. I asked Marcus about it once, casually over coffee. He waved it off. "She's just adjusting, Dad. Diane's trying. It takes time." I let it go. I'd been a social worker for 3 decades. I knew better than to project. I told myself I was being overprotective. Then last Thanksgiving, I noticed Lily wasn't eating much at the table. She sat with her plate mostly full, very still, very quiet. Diane was animated and talkative. Marcus was laughing at something his brother-in-law said, and Lily just sat there. I leaned over and asked her quietly if she was okay. She nodded. But she glanced at Diane first before she nodded. That glance, that tiny, almost imperceptible checking in, that's the kind of thing you only recognize if you've spent 30 years watching children navigate households where they don't feel safe. I pushed it down again. I told myself I was a retired man projecting professional habits onto a family dinner. 6 months ago, Marcus called to tell me he and Diane were taking a 10-day trip to Sedona and Scottsdale for their second wedding anniversary. It was a big trip, resort hotels, spa packages, the works. I asked about Lily. He said she'd be fine at home, that Diane had arranged for the next-door neighbor's teenage daughter to check in on her twice a day. "Marcus," I said, "she's 6. She's almost 7, Dad. And Kayla's 17. She's responsible. Lily knows the routine. She'll be fine." I bit my tongue. I offered to take Lily for the 10 days. He said Lily had school and it was better not to disrupt her schedule. Diane had apparently already talked to the school. Everything was arranged. I didn't push harder. I should have. That's the thing I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. I should have pushed harder. 4 days into their trip, my neighbor Dorothy called me. Dorothy Simmons is 71, a retired school teacher, sharp as a tack. She lives across the street from Marcus and has always had a soft spot for Lily. She waves to her from the porch. She keeps sugar-free lemon drops in a dish by her door, specifically because Lily loves them. When Marcus mentioned the trip to Dorothy, Dorothy had quietly decided to keep a closer eye on the house than the 17-year-old next door. I was sitting in my sister's living room in Phoenix watching the evening news when my phone buzzed. Dorothy's name on the screen. I answered right away. "Walter," she said in that low, careful voice, "I think there's someone locked in Marcus's basement." I told her to start from the beginning. She said she'd been watching the house. She'd seen Kayla come by both days, let herself in, stay for maybe 20 minutes, and leave. She hadn't thought much of it. But that afternoon she'd walked by the side of the house and heard something. A sound she couldn't quite place at first. She stopped, listened, and then she realized what it was. A child crying. It was coming from the basement window, she said. The small one, at ground level, near the garden. Walter, I put my ear down near that window and I could hear her. She was saying, "Grandpa Walt," over and over. I don't remember standing up. I remember my sister asking me what was wrong and I couldn't answer her. I was already calling Marcus. Straight to voicemail, I called Diane. Voicemail, I called Marcus again. I told Dorothy to call 911. Right now. Don't wait for me. Call right now. Then I booked the first flight back to Columbus I could find. It left at 6 the next morning. I spent that entire night sitting in my sister's kitchen calling Marcus every 40 minutes, getting voicemail every time, staring at the wall. Dorothy called me back at 9 that evening. The police had come. They'd found Lily in the basement. She was in the small finished room off the utility area, what Marcus had been calling his hobby room, a low-ceiling space with a pull-out couch and some storage shelves. The door had a bolt lock on the outside. It had been locked. Lily had a bag of pretzels and 2 juice boxes. That was the food situation for a child who had been there, alone, for 4 days. The police had reached Marcus through his hotel. He was apparently very calm on the phone. He told them Lily was prone to getting into trouble and that the room was for her timeouts and that Kayla knew she was there and was checking on her. The detective told me later that Marcus seemed genuinely confused about why this was a problem. That detail, that calm, confused tone, that's what kept me up the whole flight home. By the time I landed in Columbus, Lily was at Nationwide Children's Hospital being evaluated. Dorothy had ridden in the ambulance with her because there was no family available. Lily had told the paramedics her name, her age, and then asked if Grandpa Walt was coming. I went straight from the airport to the hospital. When I walked into that room and she saw me, she didn't cry. She just held out her arms. She was so small in that hospital bed. There were shadows under her eyes and her lips were dry and she had a small bruise on her left shin that she said was from tripping in the dark. She held onto my arm with both hands the entire time the doctor was talking to me like she was afraid I'd disappear. The pediatrician told me Lily was dehydrated and had lost some weight, but was otherwise physically okay. Then she looked at me steadily and said, "This is not the first time this child has gone without adequate food. Her growth curve over the past year has been a concern." That's when I understood that what I'd been writing off as a feeling, as professional habit, as an old man's worry, had been real the whole time. Marcus and Diane flew back that same evening. I was in the hospital waiting area when they arrived. Diane walked in first, in a cream-colored resort cardigan, and the first words out of her mouth were directed at the nurse's station, not at me, asking where Lily was. Marcus walked in behind her. He looked at me and I looked at him, and 34 years of fatherhood sat between us in that moment. "Dad," he started. "Don't," I said. I said it quietly. I'm a quiet man by nature. But something in my voice made him stop. I told him that Child Protective Services had already opened a case. I told him that the detective on duty wanted to speak with him tonight. I told him that I had spoken with a family law attorney from the hospital waiting room at 7 that morning, and that I would be filing for emergency temporary guardianship of Lily first thing tomorrow. Diane said, "You can't do that." I looked at her. "Watch me," I said. I'm not proud of saying it like that, but I'm not sorry either. The next 3 months were the hardest legal stretch of my life, and I spent 3 decades doing court-mandated family assessments. Marcus and Diane hired an attorney. I hired one too, a woman named Patricia Okafor, who had 20 years of family court experience and a reputation for being methodical and relentless. The emergency guardianship was granted within 72 hours given the circumstances. Lily came home with me. The first night she was at my house, she slept on my couch because she didn't want to be in a room alone with the door closed. I sat in the armchair next to her and read out loud from a library book until she fell asleep. In the morning she ate 2 bowls of oatmeal and didn't say much. On the third day she asked if she could go see Dorothy. I drove her over and Dorothy opened her candy dish and Lily took 4 lemon drops and sat on Dorothy's porch swing and started telling Dorothy about a book she'd been reading at school, and I stood in Dorothy's doorway listening to her talk, and I had to turn around and face the wall for a minute. The criminal case moved slowly, the way these things always do. Marcus was charged with child endangerment and child neglect, both misdemeanors at the initial filing, though the prosecutor was pushing to elevate the neglect charge. Diane was charged as well, as a cohabitant with shared duty of care. The bolt lock on the outside of the basement door and the documented pattern of underfeeding, confirmed by Lily's medical records over the previous 14 months, worked against them significantly. What came out in the discovery process made me sick in the specific, precise way that only facts can make you sick. The $980 a month in Social Security survivor benefits that Marcus had set up for Lily, for the past 14 months it had been redirected. He'd closed the dedicated account and folded the deposits into the joint household account he shared with Diane. In 14 months, that was just over $13,000. Patricia traced where it went. Car payments on Diane's Audi, a weekend trip to Nashville, gym memberships, a kitchen renovation. Lily's mother's Social Security benefits, used for a kitchen renovation. I am 63 years old and I have seen a great deal. But sitting in Patricia's office reading that bank statement summary, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt truly cold. In the custody hearing, Marcus's attorney tried to frame the basement room as a safe space and the locking as a precautionary measure for a child with behavioral difficulties. Patricia was ready for this. She had Lily's teachers on record, 3 of them, going back 2 school years, describing Lily as quiet, cooperative, eager to please, with no documented behavioral issues whatsoever. She had the pediatrician's testimony about the growth curve. She had Dorothy's statement. She had the police report. She had 14 months of bank records. Marcus's attorney brought up my age. 63, recently retired, living alone. Was I truly equipped for full-time guardianship of a 7-year-old? Patricia put me on the stand. I talked about my 31 years of professional experience assessing family fitness. I talked about my house, my neighborhood, Lily's school being 12 minutes away. I talked about Dorothy across the street. I talked about my daughter, Marcus's sister Rebecca, who lived 40 minutes away in Dublin and had already committed to helping with Lily's care. And then Patricia asked me one last question. She asked me what I'd been doing when Dorothy called me. I told the truth. I said I'd been watching the evening news in my sister's living room 2,000 miles away because I hadn't pushed hard enough when my instincts told me something was wrong. And then I looked at the judge and I said, I won't make that mistake again. The judge awarded me permanent guardianship. Marcus received 18 months of probation, mandatory parenting classes, and a supervised visitation arrangement, though Lily has not asked to see him, and I have not pushed that. The misappropriation of Louis' Social Security benefits triggered a separate investigation by the Social Security Administration's Office of Inspector General. That process is ongoing. Patricia believes civil recovery is likely. Diane filed for divorce 2 months after the sentencing. Lily is 7 now. She has been with me for 4 months. She sleeps in the room that used to be my home office. We painted it together. She chose a color called Morning Mist, which is a pale blue-green that looks different depending on the light. She has a shelf for her books and a small desk where she does homework. She leaves the door open at night, and I leave the hallway light on, and that's the arrangement for now, and that's fine. She started seeing a child therapist named Dr. Z, Anita Reeves, who is patient and warm and has a waiting room with a fish tank that Lily stood in front of for 10 full minutes the first visit. Dr. Reeves tells me Lily is resilient. She tells me the consistency of the home environment is the most important thing right now. Routine, predictability, presence. I cook breakfast every morning, eggs on weekdays, pancakes on Saturdays. She has strong opinions about syrup. We go to the library most Sunday afternoons. She has made one friend at school, a girl named Priya, who has come over twice for playdates, and both times they disappeared into Lily's room and emerged only for snacks. Rebecca comes for dinner every other Thursday. Dorothy comes for coffee most Saturday mornings and always brings lemon drops. Last week, Lily brought home a worksheet from school. It was one of those all about me pages. Favorite color, favorite food, who lives in your house, what do you want to be when you grow up? In the who lives in your house box, she'd written, me and Grandpa Walt and sometimes Aunt Rebecca. Also, a fish. His name is Carl. I didn't know we had a fish. She'd apparently been keeping Carl in a small tank in her room for 3 weeks. She'd used her allowance money. I sat at the kitchen table holding that worksheet for a long time. I keep thinking about those 31 years I spent walking into other people's houses, documenting what I found, writing my reports, making my recommendations. I spent 3 decades trying to protect children I didn't know, and somehow, the child who needed protecting most was the one eating Sunday dinner at my table every week, and I kept telling myself I was imagining things. I don't know what the right thing to say about that is. I'm still working it out. What I do know is that Carl the fish gets fed every morning before school. I know that morning mist looks like the sky just before the sun comes all the way up. I know that Lily takes 4 lemon drops from Dorothy's dish every single time, never 3, never 5. I know that she still reaches for my arm in parking lots, without thinking about it the way a child reaches for someone they trust. I know that she's going to be okay, and I know that if my phone rings and it's Dorothy's name on the screen, I will always pick up. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to pay attention, not the passive kind, not glancing up from your phone when someone walks in the room. I mean the deliberate, uncomfortable kind of attention that costs you something. The kind that requires you to trust what you're seeing even when the people around you are telling you you're wrong. I spent 31 years doing that professionally, and somehow, when it mattered most, I talked myself out of it. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not what Marcus did. Not what Diane did. Those choices belonged to them, and the consequences followed accordingly. Because that's how it works. Not in some mystical sense, but in the plain, practical way that life tends to settle its accounts. You lock a child in a basement and redirect her dead mother's benefits to pay for your car, and eventually someone hears crying through a basement window. Eventually a retired schoolteacher puts her ear to the ground and picks up the phone. Eventually the thing you tried to hide gets found. It almost always does. What I sit with is my own accounting. I saw Lily watching Diane across the Thanksgiving table. I saw how carefully she moved in that house, how she checked before she spoke. I had 31 years of training telling me exactly what that behavior meant, and I filed it away under, I'm probably projecting. I chose comfort over clarity. That's a choice too, and it has consequences just like any other. I don't say that to punish myself. I say it because I think it matters. The idea that wisdom isn't just knowing things. It's being willing to act on what you know even when it's inconvenient, even when it creates conflict, even when the person you'd be confronting is your own son. Intelligence without the courage to use it isn't really wisdom at all. It's just information you're sitting on. Lily is teaching me things I didn't expect to learn at 63. She's teaching me that resilience isn't loudness. It isn't bouncing back fast or pretending nothing happened. It's eating 2 bowls of oatmeal on a Tuesday morning. It's picking a paint color called morning mist and having opinions about syrup. It's saving your allowance for a fish and naming him Carl and keeping him alive for 3 weeks before anyone notices. That's resilience. The quiet, daily decision to keep going, to keep being a person, to keep reaching for someone's arm in parking lots. I think about Marcus too. I think about where choices like his come from, the slow erosion of character that happens when you start making small compromises and stop noticing them. It's never one big decision. It's 100 small ones. Redirecting the account just for now. Telling yourself Lily's fine, she's adjusting, you're being dramatic. Leaving for Sedona anyway. None of those moments felt like the defining one, I'm sure. They never do. That's the thing about moral laziness. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly accumulates until one day a 71-year-old woman is pressing her ear against a basement window and a child inside is calling for her grandfather. Dorothy picked up the phone. I got on the plane. Lily chose Morning Mist. We each made a choice, and here we are.